All right, today we're going to jump in and decode the very engine of the global economy, currency pairs. We're going to take a journey through this massive financial universe from the absolute superstars all the way to the wild cards. Okay, let's get into it.
So let's just start with the absolute basics, right? You hear this term thrown around all the time, but what on earth is a currency pair, really? This is probably the best way to think about it. Imagine every single currency pair is locked in a constant tug of war. You've got one currency pulling on one side of the rope and another pulling on the other. And that exchange rate you see flashing on the screen, that's just the scoreboard. It's telling you in real time which economy is winning the match.
Okay, so in this huge currency universe, you've got to understand that not all pairs are created equal. First up, we have the superstars, the absolute center of gravity in the Forex world, the majors.
So what's the secret ingredient? What makes a pair a major? It's actually really simple. One half of that pair is always the US dollar. For all sorts of historical reasons, the USD basically became the anchor of the financial world. You know, the currency that greases the wheels of global trade.
So how many of these superstar pairs are there? Well, you might think that with all the major currencies out there, you could have dozens of combinations. But remember the rule. To get into this very exclusive club, they have to be paired with the US dollar. And that brings the number down to a very specific, very important number, 7.
And here they are, the magnificent 7. Now, what's really cool about this is the FX geek speak. Traders have all these fun nicknames for them. I mean, my favorites have got to be the loonie for the Canadian dollar and the kiwi for the New Zealand dollar. It just makes the whole thing feel a little less intimidating, doesn't it?
Now, these major pairs are so popular for one absolutely critical reason: liquidity. The easiest way to think about liquidity is like traffic on a highway. High liquidity means it's a bustling superhighway with tons of buyers and sellers. You can get in and out of a trade in a snap. Low liquidity, that's more like a quiet country road.
And this chart just lays it out perfectly. I mean, look at the sheer difference in volume between the euro/dollar and the Aussie/dollar. Yeah, they're both majors, but the euro/USD is by far the most liquid pair on the planet. It's the busiest superhighway in the entire Forex world.
So, we've been talking a lot about the US dollar. But what happens when we venture away from it? Well, that brings us to our next category, a whole world of pairs that don't need the greenback to get by. Let's talk about the crosses.
So here's the deal. A cross-currency pair, which people also call a minor, still involves two big, powerful currencies. Think the euro or the Japanese yen. The key difference is that the US dollar has left the building.
Most of the action you'll see in the crosses comes from combinations of the euro, the yen, and the British pound. And of course, traders gave them nicknames too. My personal favorite might be the guppy for the GBP/JPY pair. So even though they don't have the US dollar, these are still major economic players with plenty of liquidity and opportunity.
All right, let's get a little adventurous. We've seen the superstars, we've seen the other major players. Now it's time to travel to the outer rim of the currency universe and enter the world of the exotics. And I just had to include this quote from the source material because it's just perfect. Let's clear this up right away. It's not what you might be thinking.
An exotic pair is actually pretty simple. It's just one major currency, like the US dollar, paired up with the currency from a smaller or emerging economy. So think the US dollar versus the South African rand, or maybe the euro versus the Turkish lira.
Okay, so trading exotics. It's a completely different ballgame. Remember how we said the crosses are like busy highways? Well, the exotics are more like winding mountain roads. They're way less traveled, which means higher costs to trade, and they are far more sensitive to sudden shocks, like a surprise political event. This is definitely the high-risk, high-reward corner of the currency world.
Now, besides our big three categories, majors, crosses, and exotics, currencies can also be grouped together in other really interesting ways. Think of them like alternate constellations in our currency universe.
One of the most fascinating of these groups is the Scandies. This isn't about trading volume. It's all about their shared cultural and economic history. We're talking about the currencies of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden.
And this grouping has some really deep roots. As you can see here, these countries actually formed a monetary union way back in the 1870s, all based on a gold standard. Now, the union itself fell apart after World War I, but they all kept the name for their currency, the krone or krona, which literally translates to crown. It's just a cool piece of financial history.
Okay, so we've looked at the past.
Now let's pivot to what might be the future. Probably the most important emerging group on the world stage today is BRICS+. What started as just a catchy acronym for key emerging markets has evolved into a really influential economic bloc that's adding new members and challenging the old financial order.
And if you want to understand the sheer scale of this, just look at this chart. The expanded BRICS Plus group now represents over half of the entire world's population. When you have that many people and that much combined economic power, you become a force that can truly reshape global finance.
Which brings us to our big, final question. For decades, the majors have been defined by their link to the US dollar. But as the world changes, and as economic power keeps shifting, you really have to wonder which of today's crosses or even exotics might become the superstars of the next generation. What will the majors of tomorrow look like? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me.